When it comes to preaching with bodies and systems in mind, there is at least one corner of the church that's been doing it for nearly 400 years. From spirituals to gospel music to Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit and whatever the heck Kanye's doing right now. From Richard Allen and Jarena Lee to Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr., whether Jeremiah Wright or William Barber, the African American church in the United States, which is the context I know, has never had the luxury of assuming that bodies and the sins perpetrated against them are an elective course or a social concern separate from the cause of the gospel itself. It is obvious in a study of both the substance and the style of African American preaching that bodies matter. And we have some remedial work to do to catch up. To this point, we have the gift of hearing from Otis Moss later today. Our preaching needs to move beyond a transactional metaphor. Our sin talk has to include bodies and systems. And finally, salvation exists in a multiplicity of biblical metaphors. The prophetic preacher dares to imagine a world that does not yet exist, pointing to the character of God or the narratives of Scripture in order to celebrate the inbreaking of the kingdom here on earth. Naming it when we see it, tugging it loose from obscurity and vague generalities by vivid, specific language. In diagnosing and treating the diseased social imagination, the preacher is here called to help people imagine what they have not yet seen and to build on what pieces of kingdom hope are present in our ordinary lives. In other words, preaching that lifts up a bigger concept of sin also gives us the possibility of lifting up an even greater salvation. Every trouble has a grace. Just as the African American tradition teaches us to think more broadly about sin, to include systems and bodies, the African American preaching tradition teaches us to celebrate the embodied, liberating salvation for this life and the next.